And now we're going to go to Dallas, or the Dallas area. And I know this is going to sound strange because we're going to talk to a filmmaker, producer of a film called The Great Yates. In this film, it talks about the Yates Lions from 1985, the greatest high school football team in the state of Texas history. Yeah, I can say that because it's a fact to me. Interestingly enough, Don Pinkard, who joins us on the show, believed that as well, and this passion project of his has turned into a great documentary. Go to greatyates.com to check it out. And Don, first of all, you're not from the Houston area, so you're a foreigner when it comes to that. How did you decide that Yates of 85 was the best football team of all time?
Well, that's a great question. I'll open with Jerome. And actually, I've caught a lot of flack about doing a film about a Houston football team. But several years ago, I read a book by a gentleman called The Boys of Dunbar about the great Baltimore Dunbar high school team. And so I thought it would be great if we could tell that story in the context of Texas high school sports. And so I searched, and as far as I could tell, there were several candidates, but it really wasn't a close decision based upon the level of dominance of the Yates 1985 football team. They were by far the most dominant football team of their time in that period in the 1970s and 1980s.
Now, what did you find after you started digging into the team in terms of the players and what they're up to today and how they felt about that spectacular season?
Yeah, another thing that really attracted me to the story was the historical significance of that team. And so I'm involved in a lot of historical initiatives in the Dallas area and also across the country. One of the things that really kind of amazed me as I delved into the story was the fact that some of the players did not make the historical connection in terms of putting the dots together in terms of how they fit into the history of Texas high school football. But I will say that was not the case with the coaches of the team. And that included Coach Booker, who is now deceased, as well as the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator, Coach McGowan and Coach Miller, who appeared in the film. So they immediately connected what they were doing in 1985 with the historical significance of things that had happened decades prior to the 1985 season.
And that's one of the spectacular things about the documentary. It's not an argument where you're taking the case of the best 5 or 6 teams and explaining them. It's more of a documentary of this particular team, this high school, but also you start the documentary by talking about how important high school football is to the state of Texas. And you also include in the documentary plenty of information about the PVIL. Can you explain that significance to us?
Yeah, and I think it's very, very significant, particularly this year. As you probably know, the UIL is celebrating its 100th year anniversary of playing high school football in the state of Texas. Almost unbelievably, for the first 50 years, basically from 1950, from 1920 to 1970, 50 years, the African-American schools in the state competed in a separate league, and that league is called the PVIL, or Prairie View Interscholastic League. And that league produced a number of fantastic players, but it is almost a forgotten part of the history of our state today. So we wanted to make that connection because Yates was not only the champions of the UIL, but they were also champions of the PVIL at the highest level, which makes them very unique.
Mm-hmm. In the film too, you went to Midland and talked to the players that played on Odessa Permian, the team they played in the state championship game, and come to find out those players recognized Yates as being as talented a team as it was, and that seemed like a really interesting part of the story to me as well.
Yeah, and it was interesting to us, and believe it or not, we didn't do that. And by the way, I don't want you to get me in trouble. We did not go to Midland. We went to Odessa.
Odessa, indeed.
And it may not matter to me or you, but to them, it makes a big difference.
The airport is called Midland, Odessa, but we know where it is. Yeah. No doubt. Mojo, you don't want Mojo against you, no doubt.
Right. No, to be honest with you, we didn't do that because we were really smart or anything like that. When we set out to do the film, we were going to focus exclusively on the Yates story. And what happened as we got further into it, one of the Yates assistant coaches, Coach Miller, he says, I've always wondered all these decades what that team thought of us, because you guys know Odessa Permian has a rich history that's second to none in terms of high school football in this country. I don't want to let the end of the film out, but obviously Yates ends up winning the game against Odessa. And so we did not think that the Odessa players would want to relive that part of their high school football career, particularly given their historical tradition of winning. But I will say, giving them a lot of praise, they really reached out to us and embraced us and helped us tell this story. And we are eternally grateful, because I don't think we could have told as good a story without their participation.
What has been the reception to the film?
Wow, it has been fantastic. So we started streaming it, first to a limited audience, the coaches for both Yates and Permian. Believe it or not, they loved it. Actually, Coach Miller, who became the head coach of Yates after the '85 season, he actually said he watched it the first day 3.5 times. He was so spellbound by the story. We held a Zoom call with the players to kind of review and get their feedback, and they also loved the film. One of the interesting things about it from the players' perspective, as I said earlier, they were just, 17, 18-year-old guys, and they're just playing. And in some cases, I think it's not until they actually see the film that they really understand the larger scope in terms of the historical significance of what they did that December in 1985.
And what an undertaking by you. And I know it was just a passion project that you put a lot of time and money and effort into making. And the final product, are you as pleased with it as everyone who seems to watch it are pleased with it?
Yeah, we're pleased with it. And to be honest, Jerome, you probably have more insight than a lot of people, because you and I kind of touch base kind of early in the life span of this project. And that the initial intention was not to make a film. Initially, I'd set out to try to coax a fairly famous sports writer to work with me and help me write a book. Well, actually, I wanted to help him write a book, because I felt like if I had somebody with name, it would maybe sell.
And then you realize you can do a bigger name than Jerome and make a film. I say you became a big Hollywood star now.
Well, actually, Jerome Sololmon is a much bigger name than Don Pinkard. So thank you for all your encouragement along the way. But a bottom line is, we didn't set out to make a film. We were trying to do a book, and through wise input and listening to wise people like yourself, we ended up making a film. And to answer your question, we are extremely, extremely proud of it.
As we head off, check out some more from the great Yates.
Of all the great 5A football teams of the 1980s, one of the greatest decades in Texas high school football history, stands a school with a unique and historic background, and whose 1985 football season was arguably the greatest in Texas high school history. The 1985 Houston Jack Yates Lions.
It's a 14-yard run by Johnny Bailey.
You're watching Texas Sports